you'll know that this is the first of several series of videos that I want to do on basic soundboard mixing. In the first couple of series, we're going to start pretty basic, just introducing you to the soundboard. That's what this video is for. And then we'll get into things like setting the gain, EQing, setting up the matrix, that sort of thing. Okay, but for this first time, I just wanted to introduce you to the soundboard. I'm not sure, whatever reason why you want to learn, you probably, like me, got asked to do sound at your church, didn't really know what you were doing, and then you get behind this big board with hundreds of knobs on it, and it's pretty imposing. But it's really not that difficult. It's very simple. Once you learn one part of it, it's just repeated over and over again. Okay, so I picked a smaller board here. This is at our church and school here. We have a small, small to medium size Allen Heath board. This has a 24-channel board, and it may be bigger or smaller than the one you're standing in front of. But again, it's not, even though there's a bunch of knobs on this and a bunch of levers, it's not that difficult once you learn one strip, okay, or one channel. Okay, this is called a channel or a strip. Okay, it's repeated the same. So once you learn this, it's the same here, 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 all the way down to the 24th channel here. Okay, and then I'll explain this kind of mess in the middle. Okay, so I'm just gonna touch on typical things that are on every board. Okay, there are some things on this board that may not be on your board, so if I might skip a button or two simply because it's not on every board. Okay, and but I'm going to hit the ones that are on, that's typical of every board, even if you're on a digital board. Okay, which our next video will show you that we have a digital board in our ministry center, and I will show the difference between an analog board and a digital board. Okay, and I'm putting it in that series so that people that are actually working in that venue can, and on that board specifically, will learn how to use it. Okay, but in any case, this is an introduction. So I'll teach you one strip, okay, or channel one, and then it's the same all the way across. So this top section, so wherever the sound begin, our next video will talk about the next video too. We'll talk about the flow of sound. Okay, so you can listen to that, or just note that the first thing you'll note that in an analog board, the flow of sound comes in through the cable here. Okay, and it goes into this channel for this cable. Okay, then this cable goes into this channel. Okay, the first thing you want to set up is what's called a preamp. Okay, in a preamp, this is where the gain knob is. Okay, in my next session or two, I will talk a little more detail about how to set up your gain. But note that, just a quick note that the gain is not your volume button, although sometimes it sounds like it is. It kind of reacts that way. As you turn up the gain, the volume in the house gets louder. Okay, but the difference between the gain and actually a fader is the fader is more of a volume button, volume slider. Okay, this actually adds voltage to the board, okay, to the system, so that you get just more power out of it. Okay, and so you don't want to treat this as a volume knob necessarily. Okay, so this is your gain. Most of the times you have at least two buttons. This one has three, so I'm going to talk about two. Okay, it has a phantom power, so some microphones need extra power. Okay, so by pressing it down, you immediately add 48 volts to the system. Okay, so some microphones need it, some does not. Okay, the pad, the line pad. Okay, this basically takes away voltage. Okay, so it's usually about 20 volts or something like that, or 48 volts. So So those are what those two do. So usually do not have them both down, but I've seen it. Okay, this one has a polarity button. Most boards also have. Okay, again, most boards has the gain knob. Okay, so this will set how much gain goes into the board. This has the HPF is called a high pass frequency. Basically, what that button's for is it just kills the low end of the sound. Okay, the first set of knobs, usually the first set of knobs are your parametric EQ. Okay, we'll have a better session on what an EQ is and how it's different than a graphic EQ. Okay, but basically the equalizer will add and subtract or boost or cut the signals at various frequencies. Okay, so it's the same as your treble bass knob on your home stereo. Some of you may have, you know, like a graphic equalizer. It's the same thing. This is that the parametric equalizer has a little bit more features to it, a little more flexibility than your treble bass knob or your graphic equalizer. It's a lot more flexible. Okay, and so it's a really nice thing to have on a soundboard. Okay, the next set of knobs usually is your aux sends. Okay, and that stands for auxiliary sends. Okay, that all that means is whatever sound comes into this channel. Okay, so let's say we have a vocalist set up in this channel. Okay, I can set this first aux send, okay, to send that vocal somewhere else. Okay, so to another speaker. A lot of times this is good for sending it back up to the stage to maybe a stage monitor or wedge, or if you have an in-ear system, then it will send it to the singer's in-ears. This way, everyone that signs in or gets assigned to auxiliary 1 here gets to hear what's coming out of here. So if this is a vocal singer, like your lead vocal singer, then they hear all of this. If this is your lead acoustic guitar, then everyone gets to hear that. Okay, so that's what the auxiliary sends for. You could send it to like a recorder as well if you're recording just the message in your church or something like that. Then you could send it to a recorder, and then the recorder will pick it up and record it. Okay, so that's what that's all these knobs are for. And then there's a lot of knobs because you can send it to a lot of different places. So the more knobs you have, the more different places you can send it to. Okay, all boards have what's called a pan, left-right pan. That's just a balance. Okay, whether the sound comes more out of your left speaker or your right speaker or whatnot. Okay, so that's just basically your balance. Okay, but we call it a pan. Okay, mute button. It's typical of most board. This one is a PFL button. Okay, PFL stands for post fader listening. Okay, some boards will just call it solo. This board calls it a PFL. PFL, and basically, if you press the PFL button, then you could put headphones into the system, and you can just listen to only the sound the audio that's coming out of just this channel. Okay, so you could pick that one, and if you choose 2 of them, then you get just the 2 sounds out of only these 2 channels. Okay, some boards, not this one, has a nice meter system, a bridge up on top of the board, and if you press PFL, then it solos out those meters. Okay, the meter solos out just this channel. Okay, you have meters. Okay, and those are there for a purpose. So we'll talk about that in another segment. This is called a fader. This is your main volume control. Okay, if you set it, you'll notice that there's numbers on it. So there's somewhere in the middle or upper half of the fader is 0. Okay, that's called unity. Okay, so a lot of times we'll set the fader at unity. Okay, and then you'll see 5, 10, 15, 5, 10, 15 in both directions there, okay, and that tells you how many decibels you're boosting or cutting, okay, on the fader here, okay. You might have buttons like this, which sets the group, okay. So I can set like this fader, this fader, this fader, all to group 1 and 2, okay. And if you look over here, you'll note that sometimes you'll have yellow faders and red faders, okay. The yellow faders here are your mains, okay. So this one is left, right, and center, okay. And so these are your main channels, okay? And so this operates the volume for the entire board in the house, okay. So you always have to have your mains up, okay? So if you don't have a center channel, you probably don't need it, okay. In the venue we have here, we don't have a center channel, so a lot of times we'll have it down. Okay, these are your groups. Okay, so if I set these three, I'm gonna mess somebody up. Okay, I'm gonna set these 4 faders to group 1 and 2, or group 1, then I can mix over here like this. So this vocal is really soft, so he or she is up. This vocal is really loud, so they got them down. So you got, different settings here. Okay, so as you're running your mix during your performance, and you need to raise and lower the volume of your vocals, you could sit there and do this. Okay, but most boards allow you to group them so that you can come over here and with only one fader you can go up and down, and in a sense that's like moving the entire 4 up and down by moving just one fader. Okay, so that's what the group buttons are for. Okay, and that also now just explains you the center. Okay, and that's it. That's all there is to one channel. Okay, you got your preamp gains, your equalizer, your parametric equalizer, and this particular board, you can adjust the amount of decibel level that for your high, and in your high mids you can actually adjust the frequency, and your low mids and then your lows. Okay, so those are your equalizer. This is your auxiliary sends. This is your pan, and this is your fader. And then if you look at channel 2, it's identical. Gain, EQ, aux sends, pan, fader. Gain, EQ, aux sends, pan, fader. See, same thing over and over and over again. And depending on how many people and how many instruments you got up on the stage, each one will take one. You got one vocal, you got one channel. You got one vocal and one guitar, you got 2 channels. One vocal, one guitar. Okay, you got 2 vocals and one on the guitar and one on the piano. Then you got vocal 1, vocal 2, guitar, piano. Okay, drum sets might get mic'd just with the left-right overhead, so that would take up 2 channels. Okay, if you mic every piece of the drum set, then that will take up several channels. Like you could have the kick, the snare, the hi-hat, tom 1, tom 2, tom 3, overhead, left, overhead, right. Okay, so it potentially could take up this many channels of your board, but that gives you the greatest flexibility because now you could determine the volume in the house for just the kick or just the snare. Okay, so again, that's just repeated over and over and over again all the way to channel 24. Okay, now what is this in the middle? We call it a matrix. Okay, and it's very simple. All the matrix is if I wanted to send something to, let's say, another room, like an overflow room. Okay, so let's say you have a venue and it fills up, and you have an overflow room. Okay, well, what you do is you set up one of the channels in the matrix, and you could send the entire mix over to the overflow room. Okay, and you have the ability on most matrices, I guess, to be able to determine the level of a certain channel. So for example, let's say I wanted to send it over to a room, but for some reason I don't want as much kick, as much low end in the other rooms. Maybe the speaker is not as good as the ones in the main house. So I don't want to blow up the speakers or damage the speakers, so I'll reduce the kick in the worship set. Okay, so you could do that with the matrix. Okay, so that is what those are for. Most boards have what's called a talkback. This is a talkback here. So I can put an XLR mic in here, and I can talk to my worship band. Okay, I could talk back to either their in-ears or to their wedge, or I could talk, if you're doing a, let's say, a drama production, I can talk to the backstage. Okay, so I could talk to anyone I want with the talkback, as long as you set it up. Okay, so basically that is the basic lay of the land on a soundboard. And every soundboard is got slightly different. Some boards are smaller, some boards are very big. At the church I worship at, we have, I think it's like a 70-channel Soundcraft in our house. And up on stage, we have a 40-channel board just for the monitors. Okay, the in-ear monitors. So in the worship venue at this school and church, they have a digital board. I think it's a 48-channel digital board. Okay, so and then I'll show you that in the next segment. Okay, so I hope that helps you get at least comfortable with the lay of the land. Okay, thank you very much.